Greetings, this is Jeff Riddle. I'm the pastor of Christ Reformed Baptist Church in Louisa, Virginia. And this is going to be an audio version of an article that I have written. This article is titled Verses with Zero Support in the Modern Critical Text. And this appears in the most recent edition of the Quarterly Record, which is a publication of the Trinitarian Bible Society based in London, England. And this is in issue number 649, the October to December 2024 issue. And it's found there on pages 21 through 26. I'm also going to be posting a PDF of this article to my academia.edu page. You can find a link to that page at my blog, jeffriddle.net. So I'm going to pull up this article so that you can see it. And here is the Quarterly Record. Quarterly Record is an amazing publication. Trinitarian Bible Society, they put out a beautiful version of this every quarter of the year, as the title indicates. You can look at past issues online for free. There's an archive of them. And you can subscribe, and they will send to you for free this full color publication. You can subscribe to it. But I think if you do that, I would encourage you to also send them a little bit of compensation. If you're someone who is in favor of the traditional text, then you ought to get a membership in the Trinitarian Bible Society. But here's the front cover of this issue in which I have this article. Here's the table of contents, and you can see there's my article, Verses with Zero Support in the Critical Text, beginning on page 21. And so let's go ahead and scroll down and see if we can find that article. And you see a lot of the other articles, and it's a nicely put together publication. The editorial director, Matthew Vogan, is the one who invited me to write this article about a year ago, and I finally got around to putting it together. So here's my article. Again, the title, Verses with Zero Support in the Critical Text. And let me just read, this is the editorial note that they wrote ahead of my article. They wrote, almost all modern versions of the Bible are based on the Nestle-Aland UBS Greek New Testament, rather than the Greek received text, Textus Receptus, which the TBS, Trinitarian Bible Society, uses and believes to be providentially preserved since the time of the apostles. The Nestle-Aland text has been pieced together, reconstructed by textual critics from various sources to create what the editors think might be a close approximation of the earliest text. Some of the verses included in it are created by combining words and phrases from a number of extant sources, acknowledging that these verses have never appeared in the form as printed in the modern text anywhere else before. This article examines this serious matter further. While inevitably technical, the implications are of the utmost importance. The article has been condensed for publication, but please look on the website for a fuller version with references and additional notes. And you can find it online at tbsbibles.org/0-support. The article by Dr. Maurice A. Robinson, which is referred to, is Maurice A. Robinson. Title of that article, Rule 9, Isolated Variants and the Test Tube Nature of the NA27-UBS4 Text, a Byzantine Priority Perspective. And that appears in, it's actually a chapter in Stanley E. Porter and Mark J. Boda, editors. The book is Translating the New Testament Text, Translation Theology, published by Erdmans in 2009, pages 27 through 61. So my article is a review of the critique that Maurice A. Robinson has posed to the whole method of the modern reconstruction of a critical text of the Greek New Testament using reasoned eclecticism. And so there's not a lot of my original research in this, but I'm reviewing and trying to popularize, make better understandable some of the arguments of Maurice Robinson. And so the article continues. It's got some nice pictures and images within it. But I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the online version. And as that editorial introduction indicates, in the online version, it's a little bit fuller. And most importantly, the version that's in the print magazine doesn't have any endnotes. But if you look at this version, you can find the endnotes, and there's a lot more information. There are fuller quotations from some of the citations. There's sourcing and identifying where the quotations are coming from. And you can see that there's some 44 footnotes or endnotes that appear in the online version. So with that, let's go ahead, and I hope this isn't too tedious, but I'm just going to read through the article. And so we'll make this an audio version. Some people do well with hearing things. And like I said, if you want to read the written version in a print form right in front of you, the PDF will be at my academia.edu page, or you can go to this site and copy and paste and print off the article. So, Verses with Zero Support in the Modern Critical Text of the Greek New Testament by Jeffrey T. Riddle, pastor, Christ Reformed Baptist Church of Louisa, Virginia. I'm going to skip over the editorial note and let's go to the introduction. A significant objection to the reconstructed modern critical text of the Greek New Testament has been posed by Dr. Maurice Robinson for over 2 decades now, and it is yet to be satisfactorily answered. Robinson is a retired professor from Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary who spent over 50 years in New Testament textual criticism and is a well-known advocate for the position referred to as Byzantine priority. Robinson's objection arose from his close examination of the text and notes of the Nestle Aland 27th edition, referred to as NA 27. He found numerous sequences involving one or more verses in the modern critical text, which have zero support overall in any extant manuscripts of the Greek New Testament, in ancient versions, or in biblical quotations in the early church fathers. This is because it uses a method called reasoned eclecticism, which involves making judgments about differing readings, variants, based on its analysis of available manuscripts and application of the empirical methods of modern textual criticism. As a result, Robinson contended in a 2009 article that this method has, in various places, produced a test tube text which exists only in the laboratory of textual critics, without any historical evidence that such verses as they appear in Nestle Aland 27 ever actually existed. In Robinson's article, he lists 105 of these so-called zero support verses. He says, I demonstrated that the NA 27 critical text has at least 105 whole verses whose entire running text as printed did not exist in any known manuscript, version, or patristic writer, church father. Robinson has also written an unpublished study in which he lists an additional 210 two-verse segments in the Nestle Aland 27th text, beyond the previously cited 105 single-verse examples, which also have zero support among extant Greek New Testament manuscripts, versions, and patristic citations, a total of 315 zero support verses. This is the zero support objection to the modern critical text, which has also been described as a test tube text, and even as a Frankenstein text. Next heading, a closer look at the zero support objection. In his article, Robinson begins with the observation that though the editors claim only that the modern critical text is a working text, most students, teachers, and scholars assume that it does represent the epitome of New Testament text critical scholarship. Such readers generally assume it should be used and regarded as a quasi-original text. Robinson further asserts that the method undergirding the reconstruction of the modern text violates one of the basic rules for textual criticism, as articulated by Court and Barbara Alland in their influential work, The Text of the New Testament, which states, quote, variants must never be treated in isolation, but always considered in the context of the tradition. Otherwise, there is too great a danger of reconstructing a test tube text which never existed in any time or place, end quote. He notes that the editorial approach to the modern critical text is typically to divide each verse into individual units of differing readings, i.e. variant units, and then to seek to determine what scholars deem to be the correct reading for each one without regard to how these are related to one another in sequence. Robinson adds, quote, the resultant text, even within relatively short segments, becomes an entity that apparently never existed at any time or place, end quote. For Robinson, such readings reflect an inherent problem within the various forms of eclectic methodology. He continues, quote, because the system works primarily with individual variant units, the left hand has little or no regard for what the right hand may have done in a neighboring variant unit, end quote. Next heading, examples of zero support verses. Robinson provides several detailed examples to illustrate his point. He offers Mark chapter 11, verse 3 in particular as an illustration, printing it as it appears in the Methodological 27, and making note of the two variant units in the verse using the letters A and B. So here is Mark 11:3 as it is in the Methodological 27th edition, and Kai Antis Humin Ipe. There's some wrong spacing in this Greek lettering for this online version. T poiete tuta. There's the now section A. Aipate hakurias autu cryon ekai kai euthus. Section B. Auton apostoli palin ode. Here is my translation of the verse as it appears in NA 27 with indicators for the two variant unit markers included. Mark 11:3, based on NA 27. And if anyone says to you, why are you doing this? A, say, the Lord has need of it, and immediately, B, he will send it back here. Robinson next describes the textual support for the wording in each variant unit. Variant unit A is supported by codices B, Vaticanus, and Delta, minuscule 2427, and a few Old Latin manuscripts. Variant unit B is supported by codices Sinaiticus, D, L, along with minuscules 579, 892, 1241, and a few others. He then points out that the support for the two variant units are mutually exclusive, so that the verse as printed in NA 27 has apparently zero support from any known Greek manuscript, version, or church father. That should be capital F. Thus, the main text for this verse as printed in NA 27 becomes a matter of conjecture. Next heading, an additional problem, single manuscript support verses. Robinson also points out that in addition to zero support verses in the modern critical text, there are also numerous single manuscript support verses. He offers John chapter 9, verse 4 in NA 27 as an example. This verse has three sequential variant units with the printed text of the verse in NA 27 apparently supported by only Codex Vaticanus. Robinson adds, quote, Thus, it is not surprising to find hundreds of similar cases of single manuscript support for whole verses of NA 27 throughout the New Testament. In a footnote, Robinson explains that at the time of the article's writing, his tabulation showed more than 180, current count 190, whole verses in NA 27 that had their aggregate support apparently in only one Greek manuscript, with these manuscripts ranging from various papyri to various uncials. He notes that such single manuscript support verses are more common in longer books like Matthew, where there are 35 such verses, Mark, where there are 13, Luke, where there are 27, John, where there are 24, Acts, where there are 15, and Revelation, where there are 38. The end result is that such sequential variant units become a de facto conjectural text from which all other readings are derived. Such a scenario does not appear to reflect a proper view of historical textual transmission. Next heading, the modern text transmissional history problem. One of the final points noted above, which Robinson repeatedly stresses in his critique, relates to the lack of evidence for historical textual transmission within the modern reconstructed text. According to Robinson, there is a significant disconnect or inconsistency when the modern critical text claims to be able to approximate the original text of the New Testament, or at least the so-called earliest available initial text. And yet it cannot, in many cases, with respect to these zero support verses, point to extant manuscripts which demonstrate the historicity of these readings in the transmission process. This is a theme which Robinson forcefully stresses in his article, The Case for Byzantine Priority. And that article appears in his printed version of the Greek New Testament, along with his co-editor, Robinson and Pierpont's Greek New Testament according to the Byzantine text platform. Robinson asserts, quote, "It is one thing for modern eclecticism to defend numerous readings when considered solely as isolated units of variation. It is quite another for modern eclecticism to claim the sequential result of such isolated decisions will produce a text closer to the autograph, text first written by inspiration, than that produced by any other method," end quote. In a more recent article on the Byzantine priority position and the attempt to recover the autographic text, Robinson persists in this critique, noting, quote, "In other words, eclecticism in its ultimate effect sets forth an original text that, as an entity, failed to maintain itself throughout transmissional history. Such an indictment represents the tip of a transmissional iceberg that seriously should call into question any likelihood that a text determined eclectically by whatever means should represent a putative historical entity," end quote. According to Robinson, the reconstructed modern critical text is not a historically plausible text because in many places it has left no trace in the extant transmissional history. Next heading, what about the Byzantine text? In contrast to the transmissional problems of the modern eclectic text in light of its zero support verses, Robinson suggests that the Byzantine or majority text holds a much more favorable position, especially demonstrated by extant manuscript evidence from the 4th century forward. This text represents a reasonable inference based upon the actual state of the existing post-4th century textual evidence and not upon a hypothetical assertion regarding what one cannot know due to historical ignorance. After asserting that the modern reconstructed text is based on conjecture and speculation and not upon logical inference from actual data, Robinson observes, quote, "In contrast, within the Byzantine text form, nearly every verse in the New Testament steadfastly retains well over 90% general agreement among its component manuscripts regarding its text," end quote. He goes on to contrast this with the Nestle 27th edition of the Greek New Testament and asks how that text ever could have existed in actuality, let alone have given rise to all other forms of the text, while totally losing its own original identity among the extant manuscript base. Lack of perpetuation in this regard strongly suggests a lack of existence. In contrast to the reconstructed modern critical text, the Byzantine text form, according to Robinson, has a demonstrably historical existence. Its line of transmission extends from at least the post-4th century era to the invention of printing. At this point, it is important to note that Robinson's argument in favor of the Byzantine or majority text over against the modern critical text is compatible in many ways with the argument in favor of the Protestant received text, or TR, of the Greek New Testament. Robinson himself has noted that his position has much in common with even the so-called confessional bibliology position that basically favors a form of the printed TR over against modern forms of eclecticism which favor the Alexandrian type of text. Those who hold to the Reformation text or traditional Protestant texts are indeed co-belligerents with those who hold to the Byzantine / majority text in defending passages like the traditional ending of Mark 16, 9 through 20, and the woman taken in adultery passage, John 7:53 through 8:11, and in pointing out the problem of zero support verses in the reconstructed modern text. We also acknowledge, however, that in other areas, the Byzantine / majority text view appears to be inadequate. And you can see the footnote for more info on that. Next heading. What about the CBGM, the coherence-based genealogical method, the ECM, the Editio Critica Maior, the Nestle 28th edition, and the Nestle 29th edition yet to be released? Finally, we need to respond to one key protest that might be lodged against Robinson's objection. This protest would be that Robinson's objections were raised against the text of the Nestle 27th edition, which was printed in 1993. Just 3 decades after its publication, the methodological approach of modern textual criticism has shifted significantly. The 21st century saw the development of a new computer-assisted method, the coherence-based genealogical method, or CBGM, at the Institute for New Testament Textual Research, the INTF, in Münster, Germany, and then the launch of the so-called Editio Critica Maior, ECM, a vast multi-volume series offering a complete scholarly revision of the modern critical text. In 2012, the Nestle 28th edition was published, replacing the Nestle 27th edition and applying the CBGM / ECM text to the Catholic or general epistles, James to Jude. The Nestle 29th edition is anticipated soon, applying the CBGM / ECM text to Matthew, Mark, Acts, and Revelation. Eventually, perhaps by the year 2030, should the ECM series continue, the entire modern critical Greek New Testament will be completely revised. The question then arises as to whether Robinson's critique is outdated. Reasoned eclectic advocate Peter J. Gurry has in fact made just such a claim, suggesting that the real problem with Robinson's claim is methodological. He has not used the right tools for the job. Gurry says that he spot-checked 3 of the verses, Mark 11:3, Acts 2:7, and Acts 27:8, cited by Robinson as zero support verses in the NA 27 against the ECM data. He reports that changes have been made and declares he is optimistic because the CBGM and ECM show promise that they will be able to answer Robinson's objection. A closer look at Gurry's analysis of these 3 example passages, however, shows that Robinson's objection is hardly nullified. For Acts 2:7, for example, Gurry merely suggests it might be shifted from a zero support to a single support verse. And then only if a spelling difference is ignored and the first 2 words in the single supporting manuscript, Papyrus 74, are assumed even though it is fragmentary. The first two words for this verse are missing in P74. For Acts 27, verse 8, Gurry says the text has changed slightly in the ECM, but does not explicitly explain how. Aside from these problems and others with Gurry's analysis, there are the other 102 verses yet to be checked. Most importantly, Gurry makes no mention of the fact that the example verses he cited from Mark 11:3, Acts 2:7, and Acts 27:8 are still printed exactly the same in the current Nestle-Aland 28th edition. Even in the general epistles where the CBGM/ECM has already been applied, some of Robinson's zero support verses have been unaltered. One example of this is Jude 15. More significant is the fact that Gurry fails to address Robinson's overall argument that the focus on isolated variant units, apart from other sequential variant units, constitutes a serious methodological problem for the modern reconstructed text. Gurry ignores Robinson's explicit statement in his 2009 article that the ECM of the general epistles do not address the zero support issue. He adds that once the best reading, so-called, has been established within any variant unit, the methodological task proceeds to the next sequential variant unit without regard for decisions made in the previous unit. In a recent article on the INTF blog, Dr. Marie-Louise Lachman, one of the ECM editors, explains the verse-by-verse work of the ECM team in 4 stages: regularization of the variants, establishing variant units, determining the order of the variants, and post-editing and correcting the apparatus. It is this focus on establishing variant units in isolation from other sequential variant units that Robinson suggests leads to zero support or single manuscript support verses. Robinson concludes his analysis of the modern critical test tube text by declaring it to be a wrong methodological approach. Quote, "The resultant text, pieced together from disparate variant units, ultimately reflects a series of readings that lack genuine historical existence, as well as even a plausible transmissional existence," end quote. Finally, last heading is conclusion. Robinson's exposure of zero support verses in the modern critical text reveals a significant flaw in its overall reconstruction method. In places, it appears to be a test tube text or even a Frankenstein text, only conjured up in the offices and at the computer workstations of imaginative and industrious scholars. There is no little irony in the fact that many of the same scholars who so frequently decry the received text for its inclusion at a few points of readings with only currently minor or scant extant external support are so willing to embrace a text which, with some frequency, includes verses which have zero support. It seems that modern textual criticism of the Greek New Testament, after more than 150 years of speculation and reconstruction, has led only down a blind alley. The time is right for returning with confidence to the traditional Protestant text of Holy Scripture. And with that, the article comes to an end. Well, I hope that the hearing of this article has been helpful, encouraging, edifying for those who are listening. Again, if you want to read it, you can look for it online. I'll post the PDF to my academia.edu account. Again, I hope this has been helpful. I'll look forward to speaking to you in the next podcast that appears on the Word Magazine channel. Until then, take care, and may the Lord richly bless you.